There is one part of a teenage boy's anatomy that's very important to him. This is a story about endangering that appendage. In the summer of 1990, our freshman year of high school, just a month away, my best friend Jason Reedy and I were ready to rule a weekend at my house with Nintendo and our new burgeoning CD collections. But our real mission? Pyrotechnics. My dad bought a stash of fireworks on one condition: he had to chaperone. But the second my parents backed down the driveway to run an errand, Reedy and I locked eyes. We had 1 hour, a bundle of bottle rockets, and 5 acres of property to play with fire. It was pure paradise until Reedy got lazy and decided to launch a rocket directly from his own crotch. Did the story end in a medical emergency, or did we survive the blast? Watch to find out. I'm Bill Roseberry. After 20 years in community journalism, I've learned the best stories come from chaos like this one. Welcome to my channel and enjoy this original fact or fiction feature, serving up family, friendship, and heavy doses of Gen X nostalgia on the regular. I was stoked that Reedy was staying over for the weekend. We only had a little over a month before high school started, and we knew life was about to be a lot different as the first new class of the 90s. We had been best friends for about a year, having started hanging out at the beginning of 8th grade, and I had a weekend packed with plenty of fun. First on the docket was playing our burgeoning CD collections on my rad new player. This technological wizardry was absolutely blowing my 13-year-old mind. We also had video games on my Nintendo and Commodore 64 to tackle. But the real draw, the thing we'd been bragging about all week, was the fireworks my dad had bought. Of course, Dad had one condition. He insisted on chaperoning our pyrotechnics. Reedy started pulling his 3 CDs out of his bag, but I was mostly distracted by his outfit. He was wearing that ridiculous MC Hammer t-shirt. The thing had become a Fosterburg legend the second he put it on. One of our friends even nicknamed him MC because of how enormous the letters were. Printed horizontally across the t-shirt, I'm pretty sure those 2 letters could be read from space. Below that was a topless Hammer dancing in the middle of it in his parachute pants, with the word Hammer running vertically alongside him in much smaller lettering. It was definitely a classic. We laid our collections out on the bed. Together we had 6 CDs. I'm so glad I don't have to deal with stupid cassettes anymore, I said, staring at my new prized possessions. It's so cool to just pick a song and not have to fast forward or rewind to find it. Hell yeah, it is, Reedy concurred. My collection felt superior, of course. Run DMC had turned me on to Aerosmith a couple years before, and I had fallen in love with Walk This Way. The first CD I purchased was Toys in the Attic, so I could have the original Aerosmith version of the banger. My other 2 were a Rolling Stones double disc greatest hits CD from the 60s and Tone Loc's Loked After Dark. Reedy started strong with Living Color's Vivid, but then things fell off with Roxette's Look Sharp and his crown jewel, a Kenny Rogers greatest hits CD. The guy loved Kenny Rogers, especially The Gambler. He was known to sing it on occasion, with a voice that was worthy of earplugs. Dude, play some Kenny, Reedy directed. I pleaded for some Living Color instead, and he obliged. We spent the next couple of hours jamming out with the door closed so my parents wouldn't yell at us. Dad was fine with Aerosmith, the Rolling Stones, and Kenny Rogers, but Tone Loc or Living Color would certainly earn us an earful. We jumped through Walk This Way, Funky Cold Medina, Wild Thing, The Look, Cult of Personality, and plenty more until Reedy had one final request. All right, dude, play The Gambler. I rolled my eyes, snatched the disc, and placed it in the tray. As the music started, Reedy began to sing along with his bearded hero. On a warm summer's evening, on a train bound for nowhere. Suddenly, Mom stuck her head in the room. Your dad and I are running into town, so you boys behave while we're gone. We'll be back in an hour or two. The second the door closed, Reedy and I locked eyes. A mischievous smile passed between us, like a telepathic signal. Fireworks! We turned the music down and held our breath, listening for the garage door to rumble open and shut. We each took turns peeking out the window until we saw the car back down the driveway and disappear. We were on a time limit. I grabbed a big lighter and gathered the stash from the basement while Reedy grabbed a couple of old Coke bottles for the bottle rockets. When we got outside, Reedy looked at the pile with disgust. Man, what's with the baby shit, dude? It was a tame batch. Snakes, poppets, some battle tanks, and a few bundles of bottle rockets. I bet you he's got some better stuff hid somewhere. Come on, this will have to do for now, I coaxed. Living in the country on 5 acres gave us plenty of space, but we decided to stay close to the house. I set up a glass bottle in the yard, dropped in a rocket, lit the fuse, and ran for cover. It whistled into the air and popped with a tiny spark against the sky. I was lost in the art of setting things on fire before I finally noticed Reedy's technique. I whipped around and saw him plopped in the grass, legs extended, with the Coke bottle sitting squarely next to his crotch. What are you doing? I asked with amazement. I ain't running, dude, he snapped. He lit one and it shot high and exploded. See, it's fine, he said. I shrugged and went back to my safer way. Over the next few minutes, we set them off one right after another. Then the atmosphere flipped in an instant. A loud, high-pitched scream ripped through the air. It sounded like a frightened woman. I spun around to see Reedy frantically covering his face, trying to scramble backward from his seated position. His bottle rocket was lying in the grass, fuse hissing, aimed directly at his crotch. It hadn't launched. It had tipped out of the bottle and onto the ground. Reedy was panicking, his screams getting louder as the spark chewed its way down the fuse toward the payload. I froze, watching the fire crawl toward his special place. Then, with the biggest stroke of luck imaginable, the spark hit a dead end. The fire went out. The rocket just laid there, silent. It was a dud. Reedy immediately clutched his crotch, making sure everything was still intact. We just stared blankly at each other, totally speechless for a long moment. Slowly, his wits returned. A smile crept across Reedy's face. He let out a chuckle and broke out into song. And somewhere in the darkness, the gambler, he broke even. But in his final words, I found an ace that I could keep. To this day, I still hear Reedy screaming like a frightened woman while frantically scrambling backwards in the grass. If that spark hadn't hit a dead end, the 90s would have looked very different for poor Reedy. But leave it to him to almost lose his special place and immediately celebrate by singing Kenny Rogers' The Gambler at the top of his lungs. The dude was a legend. Now, what's the dumbest thing you and your friends ever did with fireworks when your parents left you alone? Drop your stories in the comments below. Smash that like button, hit subscribe, and make sure you're back here next week. And speaking of special places, don't wait for the next video to learn about Reedy. The Reedy Chronicles Volume 1 is officially available right now. I've taken the first 5 Reedy stories I ever wrote and packed them into a premium physical glossy magazine designed to look and feel like it was pulled straight off a store shelf in the 1990s. It's loaded with behind the scenes extras you won't find anywhere else. Grab that authentic Gen X nostalgia and pick up your copy using the link in the description below. I'll see you next week with another original fact or fiction feature right here at Bill Roseberry Stories.